what I said. It's a modern construct, and people try to read this modern ideology of slavery. Black and white people do it. They try to read that back into the Bible, and it's not there. It's just simply not there. And because of this, a lot of people on both sides were able to justify a lot of the heinous and horrible things they said about another race or did to another race. They use that to try to justify this stuff. And it still goes on today. It still goes on to this very day. But you can ask one more question, Magic Man, then we got to move on.
Okay, one more question then. Um, can you explain races, like human races, as in like Hispanic, Asian, African, all that stuff? Is there really
You mean like why they look different?
not why they look
Or
different,
what?
but they're not really. They may be physically different, but in a sense, like we're all still human.
Well, race is a man-made construct, first of all. There's only one race according to the Bible, and that's the human race. Back then, though, to the closest thing you had to somebody using the word race, they used tribe. You follow what I'm saying? And
Okay.
tribes did not necessarily have any physical characteristics to distinguish one from another. Like you could be a part of two guys from two different tribes, and they look exactly alike. You follow what I'm saying? So they did it
Yes,
most
sir.
like tribe, but what we call today race, where we use physical characteristics to distinguish and say, okay, that's their race. That's a man-made construct.
When did that come into play in the Bible? Like is there a place in the Bible where you could see where Asian people like is there anything like that you can see in the Bible?
Yes, like with the Hebrews, this is how the Hebrews looked at it. If you want to call it a race thing, the Hebrews was like, okay, we're the Israelites, everybody else a Gentile. That's how they separated it out. And then when they start having beef among themselves, then they start making separation. Remember, here's an easy way for y'all to remember one thing about race, as far as like from a biblical standpoint of view. Race is all about separation into groups in the Bible. It has nothing to necessarily do with physical appearances. That came later on in mankind's history.
That's what I was talking about.
Back then, it was
Physical.
all about that.
That's what I like when did it start becoming physical? Like literally, like when did we start looking different than one another according to the
Oh, you
Bible?
talking about that concept? I thought you meant how they were dealing with each other. The Bible don't say. The Bible doesn't say when we started doing that. It has no clear action, no clear distinction of when we could actually identify somebody by how they look and say, okay, they're from somewhere else. It doesn't tell you at what point in history that became a thing.
Mm,
It just doesn't.
mm. Cause like people like they'll say like Japhet is white people, Ham is like most people in Africa. So I was just wondering like did during the flood did Noah's sons all look different and it kind of went like that? Is it actually like what science says? Is it like actually because of the geographical location? Why some
The
people.
geographical location part is true. That has been proven that certain people, depending on how close they are to the equator versus how far away they are from the equator, has affected physical characteristics. You follow what I'm saying? But as far as the Bible teaching, which is why in earlier times and even in today's modern times, people try to retrospectively insert our concept of racism and race back into the Bible. That's why you got a lot of racist white supremacy groups saying that the curse that was put on Cain, the mark that was put on Cain, they say that was a curse of they say that was black skin. That's what they'll say. The Bible never even calls it a curse. They say it's a curse, right? And then you got black supremacy groups. They'll say that mark was white skin, right? And then you go to other places in the Bible where people try to make racist claims, and it doesn't even have anything to do with race as we understand it today. You follow what I'm saying? But the Bible itself does not give any clear indication of identifying a race by physical appearance. Maybe a tribe, but not a race. That's a modern construct.
Hey, is it possible that the history fanatic can edify a little bit?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Um,
Yeah. If you
Josh
mean
is
you do mean you.
100% correct.
You mean
Yeah,
you
yeah,
though, right?
me. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
me.
okay.
um,
Just want to make sure.
Josh is
Okay.
no. Josh is 100% correct. And when JiDion just asked what he did, the only reason I know this JiDion is because of my big bro, Judah, and others who, early in our walk, we started to study the history of civilization because we felt it was important to understand what the Bible doesn't comment on because it's written for a certain purpose. But when the Bible names Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, when it names these nations, the Canaanites, what do we know about them outside of the biblical narrative? You know, these people, many of these people have their own history. They kept their own records. And so we started to do a little studying. And then, of course, there were some things we found out. So when God separated the children of Noah at the Tower of Babel, as Josh said, it was not phenotype that was the separation narrative. Phenotype is how you look, what your physical characteristics are, whether it's skin color or anything. No, it was they were separated in language groups. So you have people of different body looks who still went with each other simply because the language that God gave them at the separation of the tower, they could understand each other similarly. Now, as Josh also said, what you have happening is you have people who, in the modern narrative, remember a lot of the Bible dictionaries and things like that we read. Y'all do know all of this is work that has happened within the last 150 years. It can seem like this stuff been around forever. It hasn't. Dictionaries are a new thing. And so when you go to the Zondervan Bible and the and things of that nature, you'll start to read some stuff. And honestly, the racism, as many of us know it today, is a construct that was created within the Western Hemisphere in order to create a social education plan. And through that engineering, they were able to get common citizens of a particular ethnic group to accept what the government was going to do to another group. So it was the transatlantic slave trade and things of that nature that was used by the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, and the British in order to get their citizens to accept that we're taking people from the continent of Africa and we're going to, by force, and something we've never seen done on this scale before in the history of human beings, we're going to do this, and we need you to accept it because the first advocates against the selling of human beings and snatching them from their lands and bringing them to foreign lands as free labor were the people who were there already. So I'll give you two examples and I'll mute up. When the automobile was created, you had to be a very wealthy person to have a car. People were walking, were on bicycles or on horse and carriage. And for the every now and again vehicle that would come through a town or drive down a road, people knew that was the wealthy guy who had this new invention. After World War II, with the creation of the highway system here in the United States and all throughout Europe, you had the necessity of the vehicle created. Well, guess what happened once they start getting the average European and American citizen to invest in buying a car by qualifying for a loan? People started crashing them things, and the car accidents were brutal. People were flying out of cars through the windshields, and the
Mm.
windshields were originally made of glass. So in order to, you ain't going to be able to stop a car accident, but you could probably cut down on the damage that happens to a person if they fly through the windshield. They created a new form of glass by government decree called hexalite. So if you take a spark plug and you hit a windshield with it or your side windows on your vehicle, they'll crack in thousands of small pieces. That was by government decree to address a situation that existed. So a law was passed. But then it was something else. How do we stop people from flying out the vehicle? So government federal law was passed to instruct automakers to create a safety harness in a vehicle that if the vehicle hits something all of a sudden, a person won't fly out the vehicle. And then if you do happen to hit the windshield, let it break in a whole bunch of small pieces. Y'all do know that them two things that we take for granted when we ride in vehicles every day was a necessity of problems that existed. In the United States, after slaves were brought to Port Comfort, um, about 29 slaves or so, all of a sudden, slaves start to come in mass to the United States. They were already being taken to the Caribbean and to the French territories of modern day Florida and Louisiana. In order to get the common poor white citizen of the 13 colonies to accept that now we're going to start to bring in free labor from the west coast of Africa, they passed laws that made it illegal for whites and blacks to legally enter into a marriage, and for a black man to own any land or have a right to vote, and for white men who might be in indentured servitude and white women, you could buy your freedom. This was the beginning of laws that were passed because when blacks came here, and many of them escaped from their plantation owners, do y'all know one thing that American history has in it? That many poor whites and poor blacks would come together because outside of your color narrative, your struggle and position in society was the same. So they formed a lot of communities and there was a lot of intermingling. And in order to cut that down, laws were passed. That happened here, that happened in Africa, and it happened in India, where even a caste system was created by the British. And light skinned indigenous people of India were started to be accepted more by the British overlords. And the darker indigenous Indians, were the untouchable. They were at the bottom of the class system. So these things are the inventions of modern day forms of racism that we've inherited, and they've taken on many other forms. But yeah, it was the slave trade of the late 15th and 16th centuries that this new way we deal with stuff happened.
Praise God, big bro. And just like he just said, and like what I said, it's a modern construct. And people try to read this modern ideology of slavery. Black and white people do it. They try to read that back into the Bible, and it's not there. It's just simply not there. And because of this, a lot of people on both sides were able to justify a lot of the heinous and horrible things they said about another race or did to another race. They use that to try to justify this stuff. And it still goes on today. It still goes on to this very day. And you know what's so crazy too? A lot of these so-called Christian religions that had their conception in like the early 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, they were very racist toward black people. They were. I don't play the race card. Y'all know I don't do this on here, but when I do play the race card, it's gonna always be that high joker. It's gonna win. That's what I mean when I say that. It's gonna always be the high joker. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of black people, I'm just talking to the black people, they don't even know that a denomination they are part of did not even let them be a part of it at one time in history. Because it was started by white racist Christians. But that's another whole ball game altogether. You know, Black History Month over with, so I ain't gonna go too deep into that. But I just wanted to let y'all know that's just another reason for, at least as a black person, to not mess with some of these denominations, because most of them got racist inceptions. And now you're happy, oh, they're finally letting me in their little club. Man, get out of here.